Blessings, what's going on? It's another episode of Controllerize Live. I'm Stolen Drums. Again, with the current climate being what it is, more than play a bunch of music and celebrate, we wanted to take some time to address, what's happening. We did that last week and we had a really good conversation. We covered a lot of ground. We got out a lot of feelings. And it's been a week, and I feel like everybody's had, some time to kind of take it all in and kind of understand the ramifications of what we've seen. And, we could speak to it with a bit more level-headedness and kind of speak on things that have happened to kind of move forward and some stuff we've seen in the media of evidence of a progression of the message and the movement. So with that said, I'm going to hop into the group chat once again with the homies, and we're going to get into it. Peace, peace. What's going on, y'all?
Peace, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Living life, man. Living life.
All right. Yeah, man. I guess it's it's only been a week, and I feel like it's a lot of momentum with a lot of people that I feel like is not going anywhere, and that's a good thing. I think that's a good space to be in. Like, people are actually like really feeling this movement. To me, it feels different right now. I hope that feeling remains for a while.
Yeah. Definitely got way different energy, right now, and all platforms, right? So like in real life, outside, going to the protests, they feel different now than they did at first. On the internet, looking at different media sources and just being on social media, all of that climate feels completely different right now than they did at first. And even like at the house with the family and, around your circle of peers or whatever, at least mine, I'm noticing that, you can see and kind of feel the progression over the last week of folks like, kind of understanding what needs to happen and being prepared to, deal with shit as it is. Yeah.
Sure.
We got Nilak, the homie Reese, my guy Trey, my homie Small Eyes, my bro Fulani, Miss Empress Ra. We all in here, man, and this is a great group of minds, low key. For us to be we pulled this together super last minute. I'm not even gonna lie, but this is a great group of people to have this conversation with. So let's start it off. With this, I was looking on social media and I saw a comment. And a comment or a tweet from Chance the Rapper, and said Jesus was lynched. And I actually made a sign for the next protest I went to. I took that sign with me. He had read an article, and the article spoke to kind of some of the ties between how, we were and the idea of Jesus in the Bible. So like you can see, the some of the similarities between the two stories. And yeah, Jesus was lynched. And that kind of started this whole idea, like, well, if he was lynched, then who's his mom? And then folks know everybody comes from like the original person, the original human, and the original human was a black woman. So if you're religious and you believe God made man in his image, then that would make God a black woman. And that's an interesting kind of frame of mind and thought, you know what I mean? What do you guys think of that phrase, Jesus was lynched?
Who's going first? I guess
I'll go ahead and I'll say something.
Okay.
Go ahead, Trey.
I think that's a very powerful comment. I mean, in all honesty, when we talk about, I'll be honest. When we get in the topic of religion, that's a very pressing matter, especially in times like now. I think what that statement means to me is it's very powerful because it's very real, it's very true. I mean, do we look at ourselves as the downtrodden, do we look at ourselves as the type of people who went through are we going through, in a sense, this transformation? Because after he was killed, he was born again. Is this our born again moment? Is this the moment that we truly become more, that we rise and progress to a side, to a I guess to I would say to a uprising that we never really expected. Is this actually our time? Is this our born again moment? Because if we take that into literal terms, that's what I feel like.
Okay.
That's all I wanted to say on that.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting take. Like, is this that? Is this the redefining moment culturally for us? Yeah, that's heavy. Definitely want to think on it. Anybody got 2 cents they want to add to that?
Actually, yeah.
Okay.
It's like I actually have the courage to talk today compared to last week.
Right.
Because I was feeling all kind of emotions, and a lot of people probably could see it on my face. And even after the chat, I just broke down because it was a lot, but much better now. But in terms of that, with me having my religious background being in the background of Christianity anyway, because I've been gone to church, read the Bible, so I'm very familiar with the story of Jesus and his prosecution with Pontius Pilate and the whole nine. In my opinion, when you look at what is going on today and you really like dive into the story, you could I feel the power behind that, and I definitely believe that, considering the fact that when you look at Yeshua's message, you know, a lot of people saw his message as radical for the time, and even with certain elements such as the actual moment of prosecution before he was crucified, you had that moment where they brought the other criminal who went by the name of Barabbas. If you kind of compare that to what's going on today, it's almost like you consider Jesus the black man, Barabbas the white man. Barabbas did a whole bunch of crimes, but they chose Jesus to be crucified over Barabbas. When you look at it from that perspective, so I thought it was really powerful when I saw your sign drums because like when you really look at it, like, yeah, he pretty much was lynched because like he had a message that was considered radical for the times, and a lot of people consider our message radical, but there's so much truth behind it because it's like, how long have we been going through this shit? We don't need to go down that path because we already know by now. But I also agree with Trey's statement about us going through our born again moment, because I do see, and not more so just seeing and hearing, but I also feel the shift taking place, where a lot of people are waking up and realizing the truth and reality behind our plight as a people. And it's funny how, and I saw a meme about this too, it's funny how all this happened the moment the world shut down due to this coronavirus situation. So there aren't a lot of distractions around us. No live shows, no sports programs. And all of this was happening at the same time.
Yeah,
I definitely see. Yeah, I see a lot of parallels with all of that, from the crucifixion, Jesus being crucified, our situation, everything that was associated with that whole trial, and how it just almost to a T lines up with everything that our ancestors from Africa to America. It's so much. And then again, the born again aspect, we're seeing that now. And I think my main thing is I just pray that we continue that momentum going.
Yeah, I feel like we definitely got some momentum. To just speak on that whole momentum thing, I've had a couple experiences over the last few days where I was reminded that is different. Stuff is different. I had an article written up a while back, and somebody had published it, and I saw some things that felt weird, and I expressed it. They felt weird, and I was like, hey man, take that down. I don't like the way that came out. And the response normally would have been like, okay, cool, it's down. That's it. And I got that at first. And it was like, hey, I took it down. May I ask why you felt like, what was wrong with that specific article? And I said, yeah, man, versus inclusion, I feel like you're looking for validation, and I think I'm the vehicle for said validation. But outside of that, it feels like I'm the vehicle for said validation. And, outside of that, there just wasn't a whole lot of contextual stuff about everything else. It was just like, this dude, this shit is okay because he's here. Like type, it felt similar to that or whatever. And when I addressed that, and they the first cat kind of asked me what was happening, then like the lead guy for marketing hit us and was like, listen, this sucks. I'm sorry. How do we make it right? Let's figure it out. That shouldn't have happened. I completely understand where you're coming from, and just went through that. And that response was like, oh, okay. And it was kind of like a reminder, like, yeah, shit is different. Like, I felt like we'd have had that conversation regardless, but the response would have been different. You know what I mean? But I think being the climate of things are what they are right now, like, should you voice an opinion, it gets heard. And I think that's evidence of progress. Just like I went outside to the protest the other day, and I saw Persians for Black Lives Matter. I saw Asians for Black Lives Matter. I saw Satanists for Black Lives Matter. Like, literally, there was a sign. I've seen every possible sign, from every possible group, Jewish, everybody, rednecks, like everything. And even though it's like strange in some cases, like, I think it's a show of progress. Just like that picture that's floating around the internet today, all the Democrats kneeling down on one knee with Kente cloths on. That shit is really weird. I don't understand why they did that. That was very strange. It seemed disingenuous. It seemed performative. It seemed very strange. Whoever said that was a good idea, I would not ask them to give me ideas anymore. That was a very bad idea. That was absolutely the least awesome way you could have handled that situation. I think that they just taken a picture of the bill and said, look what we did. We hear you. That would have been tight as hell. But what they did was super weird. However, the fact that they did it is progress. I understand it's weird, but you know how like when kids walk and they take them first couple steps and they do that weird ass head nod shit and they fall, like this is baby steps. And those were the first baby steps. So like the fact that you felt like it was necessary is pretty tight. And then I saw another piece of content where like people were washing people's feet at a pro. That was weird. That's super weird. I don't understand why you would do that. I don't know what that symbolizes or what point you were trying to make. Very strange once again, but again, you did it. You did something.
I have a question.
Yeah.
There was somebody like washing Black people's feet. I didn't see this content.
That was the thing. Yeah, it was all other cultures of people like washing Black people's feet at the protest. Weird. I don't.
That's super strange. I gotta chime in for a second on one thing.
Yeah, please.
And just a real quick touch on the religious thing you was talking about. Jesus was lynched, right? I think at the end of the day, like it's got to be like a real like sense of like accountability for white Christians, right? Or just not even white Christians, just people who are not people of color who are Christian, or even people who just discriminate against Blacks who are Christians.
Okay.
Right? At the end of the day, I'm not personally. Like I'm not going to get too deep into religion. I'm just saying, like, if you hold that value, you actually really can't do like these crazy things that have been happening and continue to call yourself a Christian.
Right.
Like if you don't stand against that, I think that's something kind of morally like not aligned with like what you're saying.
Agreed.
You gotta throw that in people's faces a little bit. Like if you're a Christian, you gotta live by these principles.
Hell yeah. And that was like one of the reasons I thought that statement was so provocative, and I had to put that on the sign and take it with me to the next joint, because it was like, if you go to church on Sunday and you read this, it's going to click. It's going to resonate. There's no way it doesn't resonate. Like, I know Jesus is white in your Bible, or I know Jesus is white in your religion when you go to, but at the same time, the second you read that, it's going to click. There's no way around it because it is what it is. It was what it was. And I think in the Bible, originally, it said a tree. I don't think it said a cross, low key. But I'm not super studied up on the Bible like that. I'm not going to front like I am. I'm not Christian, but I think it said tree versus cross at first. Small Eyes, what's good, bro?
What it is, man. Appreciate you. Appreciate you and the whole squad, man. We out here. It's unprecedented times. Trying to put pyramids on the moon, man. So that's why on my background. I just wanted to. I love what the good brother Maurice was saying about this is the time for accountability. So I wanted to just add this statement to the conversation of. If one of my favorite quotes ever, I think I mentioned it to you, Stolen, when we talked this weekend from one of the best, one of the top revolutionaries of all time, El Hajj Malik Shabazz, aka Malcolm X. He said, of all of our studies, history is best qualified to reward our research. Of all our studies, history is best qualified to reward our research. So this is the time where people think a lot of things are coming out of the thin air, and that this stuff is stuff that hasn't been built up from over 400 plus years of systemic racism. But when you say something is systemic, a system has to come from somewhere, right? So what is the system? And I think it's important that, and that's why I love the juxtaposition of the sign that you made. When we talk about the system, one of the systems is not just the policing system, the government system. And this is hard for a lot of people to hear who may not understand or may not have done the history, but Christianity was a system created for the subjugation of Black people and brown people across the globe. So we have to also look at the systems that we have incorporated into our existence and how those systems have served us. And there's a film that I sent out to the good brother Stolen, and I'd love to share with anybody else who's open to kind of exploring and doing history during this time, because I guarantee you when you do, like Malcolm said, it rewards your research. It gives you a different foundation and footing to what's going on now, so it doesn't feel as hopeless, because it's not, this is thousands of years, right? It's not 400 years, it's thousands of years that this has been happening against African people and those who claim or who want power over us as a people. So I just want to put that in the context that, hey, yeah, historically, it would be that there's different information of Jesus lynched being in a tree, of Jesus being a Black man, but then going even further and looking at the historical context to see why was the concept of Jesus even created. Again, some people may not want to hear that, but if you want to do the history, there's a documentary called A Great and Mighty Walk by John Henry Clark, who's one of the foremost important African historians, Pan-African historians in the world. And it's a very consumable documentary that can get you started on a path of true self-knowledge of our history as people. So I just wanted to throw that in there, that there's layers to this too, that we don't want to let, like, it's cool that white people are washing people's hands and washing feet and all that, but they use that as a tool to calm people down. Religion has been used as a tool, and it's not conjecture, it's literally historical fact. So I think that's important, man. Yeah, I'll throw the actual link in the chat.
Please do.
For everybody too. It's called A Great and Mighty Walk by John Henry Clark. But I'll throw that out there.
And then if anybody's tuning in, they got the email earlier or they got the text message earlier, just know, like, in the Discord link that was supplied, I think I supplied a Discord link. I hope I did. If I didn't, I'm sending another email out right after this with it in there. But in that Discord link, you'll see a lot of materials such as books, places that you can donate, things of that nature. And we'll make sure this link for this specific video, this documentary that Small Eyes is referencing, gets in there also. So yeah, if you don't get it from, the chat or in the comments, you could definitely get it from there. So yeah, that part. Man, that was great. I appreciate you, Small Eyes, for that, man. That was dope. That was super poignant. And yeah, you got to look at the levels, man. There's, like, once you start looking at the history of us as people and, looking at just the world, it's not just America, literally the world history, since society has been documented, you'll see this kind of same story echo over and over and over and over again in different ways. And like, if you look at Egyptian society and Nubian society, all this stuff, it just keeps coming back, and you see the same stuff happening over and over again. But yeah, stay locked in, stay tuned in for that. We'll make sure you guys get information regarding that. I want to bounce to a different topic, a different thing that I saw. I saw another quote from another video. Essentially, the video was about white rage, and I'll share it with you guys. But then it kind of sparked an idea. And I tweeted, and I said, Black power causes white rage. I mean, expand on that a bit since we're in this context. And what I meant by Black power causing black rage is it's not just black existence. I don't think that causes people to freak out. Like, I don't think it's just like, oh, there's people there. Like, I can't take it. I think what happens is people see some kind of reflection of how you say, an idea of inferiority in themselves. So they see us and see some kind of inferiority, and then to compensate, I have to do something. And I think a lot of times that inferiority kind of complex, if you will, is magnified by seeing excellence, right? So say somebody is just ridiculously smart, and they're in your class, and you just don't have that kind of intellectual capability, and you can't keep up, and now you're pissed. Or you're playing basketball and somebody dunks on you, or you're racing and you get smoked, or whatever other situation may happen. But you kind of feel like, damn it, they can do something I can't, and I'm supposed to be superior. And I think a lot of times what's happening isn't that superiority thing isn't coming from like me as a person I hate. I think it's coming from like indoctrination of programming over time. So it's like, I've been programmed with this idea for the last however long I've been alive. My forefathers, way back to like, like the advent of the Roman Catholic Church. You know what I mean? Like, we just felt better and use that betterness to justify horrible stuff. But like generations and generation down, you may not even know that stuff. And you just have this ideology, because if you look at TV, if you look at media, if you listen to music, it's reinforced over and over and over again that we're just like violent, crazy, goofy people that don't have any motivation or talent other than like playing basketball or something. And then you get around actual people and you speak to them and you can't keep up. Or you get around actual people and you speak to them and they're just really cool ass people, and you just didn't. It throws you off. The programming doesn't match reality, and there's just like glitch in the matrix, and then you react by just freaking the fuck out. Anybody got something to add to that idea? Black power causes white rage.
Can I tie into that really quick?
Yeah.
You reminded me of a quote by what was it, Sigmund Freud, that the human mind often represses its deepest desires.
Okay.
So no, that reminds me of such, because it was like, you want something so bad, but for some reason you can't have it. You act, and they act like they don't. Okay, it's all good, but deep down it's like, again, this is deeper desire. So, and then the mind often confuses. I lost my points. I'm sorry.
It's all G.
That mainly be the one I wanted to tie in on, like the human mind often represses its deepest desires.
Yeah. Freud is an interesting character. If you could bring your mic up a bit, so we can hear you a little bit better, that'd be tight. And then maybe headphones down just a touch, so it doesn't do the echo thing. But yeah, Freud is an interesting character. Edward Bernays and Freud were very much the motivator, or at least a source that Hitler cited during the Holocaust, and said like, this ideology and this way of using propaganda gave me what I needed to be successful in my endeavors and doing this terrible shit that I did. I thought that was interesting. Freud is also of the ideology that people need to be managed because they can't handle being loose in the wild by themselves, because they're essentially they're animals, and they'll just do crazy shit versus, build societies and be amazing like we've done for the entirety of human history. But I always thought that was interesting. Edward Bernays is his nephew. So Edward Bernays, like, there's a level of genius for inventing propaganda and understanding how marketing and media works before anybody else did, at least on paper. But there's this whole nother level of supremacy that exists in his writings. I always thought that was a strange and like interesting kind of juxtaposition, because he's selling things to people to appeal to the desires that he thinks makes them inferior to him. And it's just strange, you know, and he manipulated a lot of folks. But if you look at the research they've done and some of the stuff that they did in the 60s where they're experimenting on folks and they said that they were perfect people, usually they went crazy. So most of the clinical trials failed, but the ideology stuck around, and you see it all over the place because he invented marketing as far as the United States is concerned. So yeah, it's wild that you brought that dude's name up, man. But anybody else want to kind of jump in and add 2 cents to that idea?
Yeah, absolutely. Can everybody hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. What's very interesting and what's very interesting about what you say and how black power and mobility can incite white rage. A very interesting dichotomy about that system, right, is that there has to be, like, in order to address that topic, we have to understand the steps that were put in place that causes that type of interaction between us both,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then what that does is like that holds an entire accountability to everybody involved, right? So there's a concept that's introduced by Dr. Joe DeGroy that talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome, right?
Mm.
And for that concept to be something that's true amongst us as black people, for us to suffer from a post-traumatic slave syndrome, that means the people who were passively observing, there has to be a system of cognitive dissonance that allows them to exist, you know, alongside these atrocities that happen to the people. And it's that cognitive dissonance and that sense of denial that allows them to stay afloat. So anything that kind of like attacks their the cognitive dissonance and like their system of, you know, seeing away that these things, that's what incites the rage, because that also ultimately brings accountability to their existence within the system and how they directly benefit from these systems. You know what I'm saying? There's a really dope talk about that concept more in depth by this Dr. Robin DiAngelo. I'm actually going to link it for you guys. It talks about white fragility, right? And it's a very tough topic, because it goes deep into how not only were we conditioned, you know, as black folks to sustain like feelings of inferiority and things like that, but it talks about also how for that inferiority complex to exist within us based on a systemic level, the only way that's perpetuated is that if there's a constant superiority complex that's also being perpetuated by folks that's, you know, that benefit from that directly. The same way that we can have learned behavior from, like, you know, I learned cooking from my mom and she learned cooking from her mom. You know, that superiority is something that's traditional as well. And the white rage stems from us combating that system within themselves, you know?
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It's and it's a beautiful way that you put it. I definitely like the way that you said that shit better than, you know, the idea of just the programming not matching. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's I appreciate you, you know what I'm saying, for adding that. That's a way better way of looking at that shit. I feel that.
Shout out to that controllerized mug that he just drank.
Right?
Yeah.
There. But yeah, like the idea of us, you know, by merely existing, breaking the social norms or breaking the social constructs that lead you to believe that one type of person is like superior to another type of person would definitely incite some kind of reaction. Like it's that's a given, right? Like if 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 anymore, like I have to ask why. Like, you know, there has to be some kind of something that happens after that. So I could definitely, yeah, that's dope. I'm glad that point was made. Go ahead.
I wanted to, not to switch topics completely, but just to kind of talk about it a little further. When you had mentioned, you know, when they were, you know, kneeling with the dashikis on or whatever, and just allyship in general, this past week has been very interesting watching the degrees of allyship. And as you had said, you know, it's like it felt like almost like a glitch in the matrix, because my brain was not used to white people standing up for me. So like when I'm seeing it, I'm just kind of like, are you for real? Like, I don't know. And, you know, Black people, we don't know how to trust. Like, trust is the concept of trust, we don't trust people. Like, we just don't. It's like systemic. It's something that we have trust issues. We don't know whether your intention is good or bad. You might seem to be good, you might seem to be bad. And what I've started to witness as the days are going by and the protests are going on and people are using their voice is this form of performative allyship. Someone sent me a link where a lot of individuals, not even just white people, there's Black people too, but that's a whole nother topic, that are literally using this experience that we're going through right now as a trend, as a way to, you know, let me make sure that I take a good photo. Did you get not to say that is not valid, but what's happening now is that people's true colors are coming out. You know, look at Mark Wahlberg and how they pulled up his past, you know, just right in our own ATL community, a photographer that's well known in the community that made a whole living off of our culture, his true colors were shown. Like, I'm having an issue learning how to trust, and I don't know. I want to know what your guys' thoughts are on that.
I'm gonna leave the floor open. I want to let everybody else speak to that before I hop in with my little 2 cents.
May I?
Yeah, please.
I completely agree with Rod. That was well said. That was true. It is very hard as a Black individual to trust more. Putting that aside, I'll be honest with you. I'm not trusting of everyone's words. I'm more trusting of their actions. To be honest, and I hope I don't go off a topic here, with all the money that's getting donated to these foundations, I better start seeing a Black Wall Street real soon. Like, I know I'm not the only one thinking that. I'm talking about Warner Music's donating $100 million, 4 years a piece. That's $25 million a year. I want to see something built from that. But you know, I don't want to get off a topic. Just the simple fact that it is very hard to just trust anybody's word, because anybody can say anything, you know, with honeyed words to make it seem like I'm here for you, when all the while they're laughing behind your back. But that's anybody. I think this line of trust that we have to have at this moment, I know this sounds bad, but we might need to take what we can get, because a lot of times before this, nobody was standing with us and we were screaming the same thing. Now at least we have our voices heard, the respect given, and if they're lying behind my back from it, I don't want to know, because I'm about to make the changes and really flip the script on their ass personally. I mean, if that same person is yelling Black Lives Matter, but they don't believe it, you're gonna see it quicker than I can tell you, and that's the impact that I would care to make.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I say it's hard to just be trusting automatically, but I say be diligent. You know, we all have really good people reading skills. We should be able to know when a person means it and when they don't. I mean, Mark Wahlberg was the biggest twist of the year for me. I didn't see that coming, but
I was hip to that.
Him.
Yeah, I was hip to it, and I always looked at him sideways anyway. I'm like because he was a Marky Mark after that shit, and I was like, that is a weird move, my guy. Like, so that's what you did when you was a kid, and then you decide you want to rap, bro? Like, that's really strange.
And then you look at like Jeff Bezos with Amazon.
Right.
I mean, the whole COVID experience, that was just, I mean, because the reason why that, to me, I'm not buying it, I'm having a hard time trusting, is because we were the ones, like everyone knows, and we have people that work we know people that work at Amazon, that most of them are Black and brown, that are delivered, that are in the warehouses, that are delivering all of our packages in 2 days. Like, most of the people affected with the frontline essential workers were us. And how Amazon reacted to COVID was so piss poor. There's no excuse for that. But then now you see Jeff, or whoever's handling his social media, is like clapping back and being petty to all these, you know, white people who are just like, oh my God, how dare you put Black Lives Matter on your website? And I'm over here like, but we was affected in COVID. Like, why weren't you having the same type of energy when we needed you the most? And
right.
Mind you, during this whole time in 2020, he's made like $26 billion while unemployment has skyrocketed. And so all the billionaires definitely got a lot richer during this time. And yeah, all like unemployment of who is us, you know, I'm just.
It's a lot.
I got to chime in.
Oh yeah, please.
A lot of that, unfortunately, and good points, Rod, Trey, like spot on. A lot of problem with like what y'all saying is, part of that is there's some racial things that happen to even get us in those positions, but like that's just the byproduct of like extreme capitalism. Like in America, they always gonna choose for you to go to work first. They need to pay them bills. They got to get this money, right?
True.
I'm not making an excuse for it. But at the end of the day, I think like where we're at now with like people actually having some passion for like this continued fight that's been going on for so long, I think instead of worrying about who our allies are, and don't get me wrong, we got to acknowledge and appreciate the allies that are real, right? But like, we just got to keep this energy right now going forward.
Agreed.
That way, like, you keep the pressure on your allies or people who are not your allies. You make them realize that this is like something serious is going to continue. And like, that's how I respond to the possibility of fake allies.
Yeah. I want to just jump in real quick, because that idea of it being a product of extreme capitalism is perfect, because what is capitalism created based upon? What was the foundation for capitalism if it wasn't slave trade? Right? So therein is the issue. You know what I mean? If the entire form of government and an idea of society is based on having slaves, and then it's like slavery is abolished, but not prison slaves. And then, now you have prison slaves, which is still slavery, which if you go do the homework and look at the laws, literally is slavery. Like, I'm not finessing or using some shit to be provocative. That's actually the thing. The idea of capitalism is an unspoken thing, but it's based on slavery. Extreme capitalism is low key kind of like saying extreme slavery. I will say this. Amazon purchased Whole Foods. Until 2015, I did some research. I was Googling this shit before the call because I didn't want to like misquote. But until 2015, Whole Foods used slave labor, prison labor, at a very, very reduced rate of pay, so they can make extra money off the top. And this is something that a whole bunch of companies do. Which is some of the links we need to put in that Discord. That's some stuff we need to add. I'm gonna write that down. But yeah, so you see that kind of like on TV. I'm with you, and I do something performative like kneeling, or something performative like somebody. Crush Proof Studio says Whole Foods still uses slave labor. I appreciate you telling me that, my G. Like, if that's the case, that means Amazon does, which means Jeff Bezos does, which means him doing whatever he's doing online is very disingenuous, if that's the case. But yeah, that part, man. And this is why it's very important for folks to do the history on everything, for real. Because like, if you look at how the country got to where it is, and you start to understand like, oh, capitalism is based on slavery, then that gives you some ideas. And it's like, okay, slaves got free. Well, we're police, and police brutality is the challenge that we're facing. Police were essentially the runaway slave patrol. That's where they started at. And then the slaves got free, and then they didn't have anything else to protect, so they just protected white people's property. Right? And then you have the creation, like, it gets crazy. Like, I don't want to jump ahead and get too far off like the time schedule, but if you look up like the KKK and the Democrats and what that was about and all this other stuff, it's like just so freaking important to just start reading, bro. Like, I looked that stuff up, and it made me look at everything different. It made me look at the election different. And maybe looked at everything else different just based on the history. And it's all there. You just got to ask, like, where did slavery come from? Where did police come from? Who was the KKK? Because you keep saying all these KKK dudes, like, Trump's pops and Biden with the picture with the KKK guy. And it's like, okay, who is the KKK and what were they created for? And then you go do the research and you find out that they made that organization. Well, first off, Democrats made that organization and with an intent to take over the Republican Party and get them to vote their way, because, the Republican Party had different ideas because they were started by black people. And it's like, I would have never knew that. Like, had I not did a bunch of reading. And I was like, Republican Party was started by black folks. It's crazy. You know what I mean? Like, but then you start looking at stuff and it's like, oh, that's why this happened and that's why that happened. And, oh, okay, I can see why police make so much money and I can see why blah, 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 blah. Like it starts lining up. I don't want to jump too far. Go ahead.
Well, let me say this. You know, we're based in Georgia. Shout out to everybody that's tuning in from around the world. But, you know, we're headquartered in Atlanta, ATL. And so tomorrow is the day that we have to vote for the primaries. And I went and voted early last week. I mean, let me tell you something. Please, tonight or before you go tomorrow, because I absolutely want every single person that listens to the sound of my voice right now to vote if you are able to. But please go to Ballotpedia.com. That's Ballotpedia.com. And please read about who you're voting for, because what we do as a community every time we head to the polls is we just go Democrat, Democrat, Democrat. Oh, that name look cool. Okay, I'm gonna select that name, or I don't know what that is. And it's just like, you just, am I lying?
No, you telling the truth. I did it.
I'm just like, I don't know. This is a lot of people. Like, okay, fine. And we just boop, boop. Let me get out of here. Let me get my sticker. Let me put it on my shirt, and let me take a picture for the gram. Boom.
Mm-hmm.
And what we don't realize is that these people who are Democrat or who are whatever got some really crazy policies that, and it really truly does start local. It really, really does start local, especially within your counties and your cities. So go to Ballotpedia.com, research, jot down like just little notes, not because that person's black and they cute, like really jot down who these people are and what they're about. And then all I'm gonna say is anybody but Trump. That's it.
Also, there's another site. I see some folks in the comments responding with Ballotpedia.org, which is tight as hell. For folks that are interested in what's happening on the Democratic Party, and I know the Democratic Party looks crazy as shit right now, but for people that are just interested in understanding the politics on a local level, informedgeorgiansforjustice.com, they actually sent out a bunch of questionnaires to all of the candidates for the sheriff and the DA and had them answer questions like, are you still arresting people for marijuana after this is over? Do you still believe in the death penalty after this is over? Mandatory minimums, blah, 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 blah. And they just went down online and asked about all the crime stuff, which is very important if you live, if you fuck with our community in any way, shape, or form, because the crime stuff is the stuff that sets us back. That's how they stole the votes back. That's, you know, a large portion of it anyway. That's where this whole new age slavery shit come from. All of this stuff is stemmed from enforcement kind of space or whatever. So yeah, both of those websites very important. I have not yet found the Republican version of that Informed Georgians for Justice website, but I'm looking for it. So if anybody knows what the other version of that is, please let me know.
There's can I jump in real quick? Just since we're talking about voting tools,
Mm-hmm.
There's another tool we've been pushing through Digital Good Times over our platform. But it's this company that's Georgia based. They're called, and I'll put the link in the chat and you can add it to the Discord too. It's called branch.vote. And what it does is it basically allows you to choose between Republican, Democrat, or partisan. And depending on your choice, you didn't get selected was people that are local, like the Supreme Court judges. I mean, no, it's not Supreme Court. The judges that are up for re-election, all the people that are on the ballot that are close to you. And it basically makes like an audio podcast mixtape of your choices. And then it is a it's really supposed to be nonpartisan, no party specific breakdown, 10 minutes a piece on each of the officials so that you can listen and consume what their policies are, what they do. And then it's like a data stat sheet. It's pretty lit. And it's, to your point, I think it's the only one I've seen where it shows you both Democrat and Republican, where they stand and responses to certain issues and gives you a summary. I wish they would have got this tool out earlier to people, man, because it's freaking crazy. It's next level. I think people will be consuming their political content in digestible audio sound bites. So I'll put that link in the chat too for y'all to check out.
That's awesome, bro. I appreciate that, man.
Yep.
Hell yeah. No, this is good traction. Like, voting is very important, specifically on a local level, just like Ross said, that's a fire ass point, and I'm glad she in here every week to make these fire ass points. Go ahead, who got next?
Actually, I wanted to chime in on something I discovered out here in Georgia. This is my ignorance showing light. I have to just straight up say this. Did not know that Georgia does not recognize hate crimes. That was crazy. A discovery I just made. I know, like I said, ignorance is bliss. But I will say this: the reason I figured this out, there is a place called Georgia's Peach Oyster Bar. It's owned by a known sex offender, and this dude. I just want to let y'all know just how quickly snakes can be in the grass. This individual is also an investor and a donator. I'm sorry, not investor, a donator to the NAACP. And he holds clan meetings out in Harrison. It's in Paulding County, right on the Paulding County line, but it's in Harrison County technically, in Temple, Georgia. Kid you not, has all types of crazy racial slurs all over the bar, Ku Klux Klan heads, a whole 9 yards. He put signs up that is extremely racist. I mean, well, when I say where it's at, of course you realize that, but just I urge people to vote because I'm pretty confident nobody voted for the right judges, for the right officers, chief, sheriffs, any of it. Nobody voted for those things when they should have. And that's why it's extremely important that you vote because stuff like this happens.
But we can now, though.
Recognize the hate crime, and so I'm not going to take up too much time, but
Trey brings up a very interesting point, and as I digress to Empress's initial statements about trust, especially when looking outside of our community, it's a very interesting thing that a lot of times that there's a lot of whenever people of color tend to mobilize, it's a very prosperous opportunity for people outside to use the platforms that we create and the mobilization that we initiate to not only profit from that commercially, or maybe even get their own platforms, to a bit more emphasized. And like that was part of the reasons that the SCLC, which was Martin Luther King's, organization, why it had a lot of tumultuous times, because they allowed outside funding to come in and kind of dictate how things were going to operate. And so when we're talking about trust, it's trust isn't something that we really can afford to have on certain levels, because if we have organization, having allies and things like that is their implementation of how they help is going to be one self-serving and in the other case because their livelihood is usually not affected by it, and most of the time the efforts that they do input, it's just it's to help alleviate. And like you said, Jones was a very important point. We can't allow ourselves to be vehicles for others to alleviate their own guilt. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Fulani
I
come
just
through
feel
with the
like
bars.
with that head wrap, I'm just like I feel all of that, and then you do the sipping of the with the controller's mug. I miss you, Fulani. I really do. I can't wait to see you in real life.
Straight up. It's coming soon though. I'm excited about that. How do y'all feel about Bonfire opening back up? Not specific to Knock Bonfire, because Bonfire's tight. Don't get it confused. No hate. But how do y'all feel about Georgia just opening up like events in general? Like, how do you feel about people coming back outside? What do you think about that?
You know what? I can't be mad at people. I personally, I'm social distancing on God. Like, I don't know enough about what's going on, so it's safe for me and my responsibility to assume the worst. But when I'm looking at people and what we're doing and how people are responding, I can't be mad at how they are responding to things because, they've been telling us to quarantine and all this good stuff. And then you have, white folks going out protesting the COVID. And then the language used to describe them was they are good people, all this types of stuff. And then we go out and mobilize. It's like, oh, they're thugs. They're, increasing the chances of all this and this and that. So for someone to look at the chronology of what's happening and people go, oh my God, like when people can look at that and go, man, they don't care. This stuff is a conspiracy. It's not real. It's not this and that. Like, I can't blame them because look what's happening. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Look what's happening.
Right. I just to throw some extra information into the pot. I did some research, and at peak, I'll say it like this: from peak till now, we've reduced the amount of new cases per day, new hospital visits per day, and new deaths per day by around 40%. Now understand, peak would be representing like 100%, and then where we are now is representing 60%. So based on those numbers, my stance is I'm going to need some more time before I go outside and throw parties and have 600 people come hang out and listen to music. But yeah, from peak till now, from the worst that it was during the entire time, regardless of how much padding was involved in the numbers or how much, how much people were trying to hide how high the numbers were, whatever it was, the peak number that I could find until right now, we've only dropped about 40%. So just keep that in mind.
Right. I think it's still socially irresponsible, but I can't tell people how to live their life.
Right.
Hey, if I go, I go. I'm only risking my life for social. I'm only risking my life for protest and change. That's it. I'm just telling y'all the truth. Protest and change. I'll risk my life for that.
Yeah, and I want to speak to that just because I saw a couple comments about a double standard of protesting and people being outside. I had a conversation with my son today, and he said, "Dad, I want to go skate in the city. They're doing a protest for skaters in the city, and we're just going to skate around. It's going to be cool." And I said, "Where it's at?" He told me it's in 5 Points. And I said, "Okay." And my son's 18. I set him down. I said, "Okay, I'm going to tell you a story. Me and your mom went to protest last week on the first day after all this popped off. And we felt like it was the right thing to do. My state of mind when I left my house was either A, I may lose my life, or B, I may have to take someone else's. And I was completely ready, head to toe, for either one of those options. And I understood that was what I was putting on the line to go out there and be present in that moment. And I felt like that moment and that cause was important enough that I could take that risk. And I'm saying a lot. So I'm explaining to my son, like, you and your homies are going to go out there on skateboards and be in all black on skateboards, just like everybody that people have been looking on the internet for like 2 weeks. Now, I'm not telling you no. I won't tell you no. You're a grown man. You can make your own decisions. I will not tell you no. However, you do need to understand the gravity of the decisions that you make. And as a father, my job is to, as best I can, prepare you to understand said gravity so you can make good decisions. So I told him, like, I was ready to kill or be killed when I went out my house. If you're not ready to kill or be killed, you should think very strongly about going down there to skate with your homies. If going to skate with your homies and protesting is important enough to you to go to jail, catch a bullet, or catch a body, then I can't get in front of you and tell you no. Anyway, understand that. And for folks that are saying it's a double standard, people know what the standard is. People understand what COVID is doing. People understand the implications of being outside. They understand the implications of being in front of police. They understand the implications of riot gear, rubber bullets, batons, dogs, whatever else is happening, tear gas. They understand all of that, and they went outside anyway. So I'm just saying that to say it's not a double standard. This is a conscious decision to make a statement. And the folks that are out there making that statement on a daily basis are braver than most of us are. So before we start speaking about double standards, we should first applaud the folks that took that step. Go ahead.
Yes, you are right in everything that you just said. But to play devil's advocate, I come from a space of healing and a space of mental health and the importance of making sure that your mind, body, and soul is 100% at all times. And I recognize that during this time, a lot of us are struggling mentally. A lot of us are not able to go out and protest. A lot of us are not able to do a lot of the things that everyone's doing right now. And with the days that are turning into weeks that are turning into months, having that space, I know for me, Controllerize has been a very healing space for me. We have worked so hard to create that for our community. You know, we've never had a huge incident. We've never had, the energy in there is always right. Very rarely do we ever have any issues. And so, you know, as the world is opening back up, you know, that space is sacred. And I know that our community like needs that. So I look forward to the day that we do open those doors again, because I'm sure that is going to be a space, like it's therapeutic. I mean, anyone could argue with me. It's therapeutic to walk into those doors and for 4 hours just be like, you don't got to worry about this color of your skin. You don't got to worry about who you dating. I said this last week. You don't got to worry about anything. You just can be. You can play games. You can listen to music. You can dance. You can flirt. You can eat. You could drink. You could literally do all your favorite things in one place. And it's great. When you go home, you're just like, man, I needed that. You know what I'm saying? And it's very hard to replicate that online. As you see, that's the reason why that's why we waited so long to live stream, because it's very hard to replicate that feeling. And so I'm just, I recognize if we were to have safe measures in place for people, that it could be possible.
Yeah. I can't wait to get back to what we had. I can't wait. Like, I need it. You know what I mean? Just to piggyback off of what you were saying, like, that was exactly the energy. Like, I 1000% agree with you. Like, I would give so much to just get back out there right now. But at the same time, as adults, we have a responsibility to make sure that when we do that thing, we're not putting anybody at risk. And that's my opinion, and I don't want to ever like take away from anybody else's decisions. They made them with their own intentions. I don't know what their intentions were. People do things of their own volition, and that's what makes us beautiful, because we can do whatever we want to do as individuals. But for me personally, I think the best thing that we can do collectively is get more data. 40% is not enough percent for me to say, yeah, let's get back into it. Say we go past the next 2 weeks and the data comes in from all the protests and the data comes in from everybody else opening up, and we see that data, and that data is like, yeah, there's 15% chance or 10% or 5%, then we can start really having this conversation about how do we roll out the party now. But I think just even if this shit is fake and it's not real, which I don't think, I still place a higher value on the community that we serve than I do whatever money or mental benefit I personally or we personally, for that matter, would get from being present. You know what I mean? So I think it's important for us to just think super hard, look at the data. I'm a data person. Look at the data, and then make a decision based on said data. And we just don't have that shit yet. It's just not here for us to be able to make that call yet. So we got to wait.
I want to chime in about the data points, man. And to your point, like you were saying, Stolen, like, you can have your opinions about whether, what's man-made and real and whatever. But the reality is, we know that Black people are being, you could say, either intentionally, unintentionally targeted because of this systemic setup, that we are the ones that are suffering the most, as the data shows, from COVID. So it is a real reality for us, A. And B, I wanted to circle back to Stolen's point about how important it is to recognize, like, when we go back and think, when they talk about who were the real freedom fighters and honestly, who gives a shit about the looters, you know what I mean? But like, they're just like a piece, an accessory piece to what's going on. Because a lot of people always will jump on top of Black movements and co-opt. Again, history, best qualified to reward our research. So it's not like it's never happened before, and unfortunately they get pushed to the forefront. But the real freedom fighters, the people on the front lines, history hopefully will be kind to their struggles, and that, again, Black people are out there on the front lines with the fear of COVID in their face. So it's death on both sides. Like, you could be killed by the police, you could be killed by COVID, and people are still going out. And I do think that's so powerful. It shows you how resilient and how indomitable the Black African spirit is, man. Like, if you don't believe that we can overcome, then that shit should tell you something. But on the other side of it, from a data point, when it comes to just like where we are as a society, you got to look to where the businesses and what they do they are the ones that, as we said before, capitalism runs the entire globe. So as they move forward is how people will determine how they move forward. And there was an article out that just came out this week, actually I think today, posted by Stereogum, where they asked 500 plus epidemiologists. That's a hard fucking word to say.
It is.
Epidemiologists. When they would come outside and go to a concert, and like these are people, this is their whole life, is this shit,
right?
And they're like, yeah, like maybe in a year to 2 years,
right?
Until a vaccine is created. You know what I mean? So I think it's also important for us to like be honest about the reality of, we can be optimistic, but honest about the reality of where this can go, of us for musicians who do this from a professional standpoint, especially DJs and producers and artists, like that this is your revenue stream. We have to set ourselves up for the future. And that's why I think it's important for us to future proof ourselves. And why I love how Stolen is, of course, been a pioneer in the streaming game for quite a while. Like he was streaming before that shit was cool, like 7 years ago. I mean, it's kind of the thing that helped co-birth Controllerize, for those that don't know, the Beats and Chill series that you popped off 6 years ago.
Yeah, it was a minute.
It's so crucial. But think about that though. That platform is how you were able to help build Controllerize. So it shows you how powerful the concept and how the space for live streaming, even though it is not the same as us being in the physical space, but we have to utilize the resources that we may have to us where we won't be able to gather, and they won't recommend it for a year. So that's possible in this real reality. And so because of that, we got to arm ourselves. And that's stuff that I'm working on with Digital Good Times. And I know that's what Controllerize is doing too. We got to arm ourselves, creators. We cannot wait, because the world's not going to stop. So I just want to say that.
Agreed. And I think just to add on, first off, I appreciate you making those comments. Ra, as always, you was on point with yours as well. Just to add to that, like part of us doing knowledge right now, part of us getting educated is understanding how online platforms could work. Shout out to Vidishna. She said, or he said, apologies if I fucked that up. Could Controllerize take over the entire parking lot at MNG to be spaced out and still allow an event to take place? I love that idea, and I'm going to ask. So shout out to that. We'll definitely get an answer to you soon on that. If it's the case, you'll see a flyer and we'll be like, we out here. So that would be awesome. But I'm going to ask that question. And I've had a couple other conversations about possibly doing some like, drive-through theater type stuff. But it hasn't panned out yet. So, what was I going with that? So we need to arm ourselves with knowledge on how this landscape looks online, right? There's no company in the world, and every company is exploiting something or someone. There's no way you could be a company and not do said thing. Like at some level. Now, either you exploit in some ways and you give back in some ways. Some people give back more than they exploit. Some people exploit and just keep money. There's various versions of that, but the idea of business in and of itself is, making money off of something, which is essentially exploitation. But we need to understand that in order for any business to survive, they have to create content. And if your business is based on Black culture in some kind of way, the people creating your content should be Black people. At least like right now, like it's just very strange for you to, to not have representation in these moments. So knowing that, we have a unique opportunity to have the difficult conversations, to do the difficult talks, to create the difficult content, to tell the truth and be uncut and raw about it, and have companies pay for it. This is a unique situation I've never come across in my life, but we're here. And I'm definitely sending out pitches like, okay, I want to have this conversation about artist exploitation on your platform, which I think is somewhat guilty of doing said thing, and I want you to pay for it. And we're having conversations. It's not like, get the fuck out of here. What are you talking about? It's, we do need to have this conversation. Let's figure it out. And that's the truth. Let's figure it out. So like, you can't fix some shit if you don't acknowledge its existence. So it is what it is. And you see this online with people saying like, I know how I got here. And that's a beautiful thing. They know. That's a perfect kind of start to the conversation. So like, okay, cool. You know how you got here. Dope. to give back at least as much as you're taking, or not even necessarily what you're taking, but like how are you adding as much to the culture as you're benefiting from it, or at least attempting to. You know what I mean? Those kind of questions for those. And then like even there's opportunities, there's teachable moments that I'm seeing where people are doing stuff like this and not really knowing. They're doing it unconsciously in a way. Like you got to remember, like, and I have a hard time remembering this shit, but you got to remember that just as much that as we've been indoctrinated to these images and ideas, you know, everybody else has as well. I'm trying to delete the word they from my vocabulary. It's challenging. I suggest everybody do it, but it requires you to put a face to they. And they is a really, you know, kind of like, it's a lazy term to use in my mind. Anyway, as much as people, you know, benefit from exploitation, I feel like they should at least attempt to give back to said culture that they exploit. And it's like, you know, how are you doing that? That conversation is something that's happening. And then we get these opportunities for teachable moments. So it's like, hey, bro, that's kind of weird. And here's why it's weird. You know what I mean? I don't think you should do that shit anymore. And a lot of times what people are saying is, fuck, you're right. Like, that's what I'm getting back. You know what I mean? It's not like you're wrong, bro, blah, 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 a bunch of resistance. It's like, oh shit, I was doing that. Why was I even doing that? That doesn't even make sense. And it's like evidence of the progression and the consciousness shift that we're having right now. But I think those are opportunities to correct course. And I think we're uniquely suited to do so. You know what I mean? We can definitely steer that correction of course in a way. And then being that we're speaking to it from our narrative with our shorthand and our ideology being inside of the culture that we represent, when we do that, we can do it in a way that's real and organic. And that's beneficial, I think, for both parties. Because at the end of the day, like, yes, there's a challenge between two different types of people. There's a challenge between two races. There's a challenge between black and white folks. But at the end of the day, we live here. This is our country. There's no way around that shit. So either A, we live here together and complain about all this shit that's happening with each other, or B, we acknowledge it and then we work towards correcting it. And I think that that's the action we the latter is probably the preferred way of moving forward for me anyway. I don't know about everybody else, but for me, it's like let's talk about it and then fix this shit and move forward and keep it pushing. Anyway, how do y'all feel about that idea?
I'm all for it. I understand. I respect your cautiousness from it, the safety from it, the well thought out organization of it. My bad, Maurice. I think you were about to say something. Yeah.
Go right ahead, Trey.
Thank you, my brother. No, but no, like I'm all for it. I think that that careful planning and organization is what's needed. I definitely like that idea though. That I forgot the name, what they suggested though. That was a really, really good idea. As far as with businesses though, I meant to also state one of the guys in the chat on the Facebook one. They were saying, be careful because the Georgia government has been known to skew data and afflict the flow of benefit dollars to individuals and small businesses. It was told by Charlie, and that is a thing. So we have to be very mindful of that because at the end of the day, we're a family, but we're a business too, and that is something we have to think about because it can affect it. So that's all I wanted to say on that.
Hell yeah, appreciate that, man. Anybody else want to jump in?
Maurice, did you have something to say?
Nah, I kind of lost my train of thought, so I'm gonna let other people speak.
Right.
I definitely commend the ideology that you have, Drums, and I think there's merit for that. I just think in the phase of where we are in the movement, I don't think we're ready for that. Part of the conditioning that's caused a lot of our troubles in this country was a lack of organization, a lack of community and a lack of unity, you know what I'm saying? Whether you feel tethered to this country or not, or you observe a more Pan-African perspective, the sense that there is no universal or universal connectivity that's outside of just like our immediate family and community is what's going to ultimately be the biggest issue in terms of progress. Because if we can't look at any given situation and go, us, and this is what's happening to us, and this is what we need for us, you know, it's going to be that much harder for us to get past that next stage. And if you look at other dynamics within this country, you know, it's not like it's not a separatist ideology, but it's more of it's an understanding that having a sense of community that exceeds just social, political, or even financial things like that. Having that sense of community is ultimately what's going to make us stronger, because there is already that dynamic in terms of fraternity when we see each other just on a surface level, and there's a reason why that exists, and there's a reason why we feel that, and we have those inclinations towards each other, and it's less about bias or like racial attributions. Sometimes it's just as surface as relatability, and knowing that just because me and you look the same, or we've been through certain experiences, there's a relatability, and you can understand where I'm coming from, and I can understand where you're coming from, and we can communicate more effectively in that aspect. And I think personally, until we have that sense of organization to where, when injustice happens to a person that looks like us, that there is always going to be a kickback by people that look like us.
Mm-hmm.
Until we have that dynamic, it's going to be harder for us to mobilize.
I agree. 100%. I think, and I want to ask you a question kind of relating to that point that you just made. If I feel like 1000%, it's very important that we do work at home right now. But there is a large portion of us as a subset of the whole society that has to get up on Monday morning and go to work with everybody. And the ideology, like I 1000% feel you and 100% agree with you, but I think in those moments, you're like, whether we're ready for it or not, we're going to be shot right into a situation where folks are challenging us and asking us questions and doing things that need some kind of guidance. They're going to be like, I don't know what to do, bro. I don't know. How do I fix this? What do I do right? And I would rather us steer that conversation than the people who are literally telling us they don't know how to respond to the new circumstances. You know what I mean? I would rather us control that narrative than anybody else. I feel like that's super important. You know what I mean? What do you think about that?
You know what? And I don't disagree with you there, but here's a very interesting topic, right? I was talking earlier about there's a course by Dr. Robin DiAngelo who talks about breaking down the constructs of the superiority complex that some people have, and then also she talks about white fragility. And a big part of that is that reform within anyone's community, whether you're white, black, whatever the case may be, if you're speaking on a specific topic, one, you'll be able to look at it more critically if you have experienced said mindset, and then you can reform from within. Part of us and trying to create a conversation and a rhetoric where we're trying to hold either people accountable or bring light inadequacies in people's minds or thinking, anytime that comes from someone outside of that community, it always or most likely can turn into resentment, contempt, and those are the things that produce white rage. You know what I'm saying? Because what that is us. At the moment it becomes someone outside of your ranks who doesn't understand your experience or even the sentiment behind it. It's a finger that's being pointed. And same way why our community, because like look at us right now, right? We have a responsibility, and the reason why we don't experience as much success in terms of like the conversations that we have is because there's too many people that aren't at the table with us trying to contribute to the dish. You know what I'm saying? So when we look at that, and if that's our reality, we can't go and say that we can create that same circumstance in another community. Like at the end of the day, our responsibility is to not the responsibility of the conscious. And this is a quote by Kwame Ture. He says the responsibility of the conscious isn't to make the unconscious conscious, but to make the unconscious conscious of their unconsciousness. And that's as far as we can go, because the rest has to be done by them.
But even in doing so, are we not leading the conversation?
It's not. I get what you're saying. You can see it as leading the conversation, but it's like that's like me. It's like me. It's teach a man to fish, right?
Mm-hmm.
Teach a man to fish. You know the quote. But it would kind of be an arrogant statement to say that by me teaching him how to fish, like I'm feeding him and his family. You feel
That's
me?
different. Yeah, that's different.
It's a different thing. It's a
Yeah,
different thing.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
we're initiating a dialogue, but we can't be the ones to lead people to understanding and inciting change within the community, because the whole idea behind post-traumatic slave syndrome is we have a conditioning that has left us crippled, and that same not that same to this, like, in terms of malice, but there's a equal degree of damage that's been done in terms of mindset, but that work has to be done with them. You get what I'm saying? Like, they gotta work on that within their own communities and people. I mean, like the Dr. Robin D'Angelo, like, she's a Caucasian lady, and she talks about things, and I'm listening to these lectures, and I'm like, whoa, I'm not even, because, like, I'm not a white person. I
Right.
wasn't raised, around white people with a certain understanding, so, like, I can't even speak the language that she uses and how to communicate and things like that. And we gotta respect our place in terms of what we can offer in conversation, because all we can really speak on is what we experience.
But I
And them
mean,
to us.
I think what we experience is important enough that we need to address when shit's goofy, right? So say like today, we saw that goofy ass picture, all them folks kneel down, right, with a kente cloth on. That shit is goofy. However, these are some of the highest ranked officials in the land. Left up to their own devices, that's the shit they came up with. So, like, on some level, they need feedback. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And that's where I think the power of our allies can come in, right? Our ally is that we can do is, like, we I think we spoke, you talked about, I think it was the French army
Mhm.
and the United Army in terms of, like, the firing
Mhm.
range, right? Um, as a soldier, I don't go to the soldier and say, yo, you ain't doing that right if you're a part of a different army. I go to my general, and my general go to your general, and your general tells the other soldiers. You feel me? But the reason why we have these issues and why there's a disconnect in terms of how we relate and how we communicate with folks is because we don't even have a hierarchy. There's no organization for us to even go to a general, for our general to go to their general, to them to speak. Because the moment we go directly to the goofy post and we respond in the way that we want to respond, it becomes almost like we're mocking, and then, like, the people who they're more likely to go, well, then shit, fuck it then. Like, I tried my best to do something, and they don't know how to do that.
Right.
And so we're and sometimes, like, that pushes people further away from where we need them to be.
I can agree with that statement. This is awesome. I'm gonna keep fucking talking to you because this shit is tight. I think we need to keep having this conversation. I agree on a level that yes, if I'm fighting your army as a soldier in my army, the last thing I need to do is try and enforce on you my wartime laws, for lack of a better term, right? The last thing I need to do is try and get you to act like we act, because you're on that team and we're on this team. However, right now, those guys make laws that affect us, right? So right now, even if it's uncomfortable, even if the conversation sucks, right now, we're on the same team. It is what it is. Now, how we ended up on the same team is fucked up. But we live here. We all live here. And we built here. So we're not leaving here. It's not like, all right, I built this shit for y'all for free. All right, I'm gone. Y'all be good. I'm going to just go start over somewhere else. Fuck that. We built this. You know what I mean? So if we built it and y'all live here and you're like, yeah, it is kind of fucked up that y'all built this shit and we just took it from you, then yeah, I'm going to explain how fucked up it is. Like, and maybe that's how you say, counterproductive in some ways. And I think it is. But I think the level of counterproductivity is less than the anguish and the challenges I'm gonna deal with by just leaving alone and leaving everybody else up to their own devices.
100%, and I 100% agree with that. And in order for us to, I think, to see the real change from that, is that we're getting that response, like those folks kneeling down and the dashikis and people washing folks' feet, like that's white guilt.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need guilt. You feel me? We don't need that. Like that's not helpful because that's a self-serving concept to
Mm-hmm.
alleviate you and as an individual. What we need is accountability and humility. You feel me?
Exactly.
That's what's going to change like the dynamic. And I'm not saying that is we can't do that and have that conversation, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be very hard because we don't come from a place of we've been humble. You
Mm-hmm.
feel me? Like we ain't never had to be taught humility almost. You feel me? And naturally we're welcoming, loving, folks. Like this movement has always included everybody who feels as though that they need that type of security and homestead. So like the things that seem like it's mediocre and you know just simple for us trying to explain that to folks who have never experienced that type of lifestyle is going to be hard to put it in a palatable way. I'm not saying that the conversation can't be had. I'm just saying that sometimes us as mobilizers don't have the rhetoric we need that maybe an organizer might have to
Mm-hmm.
incite that change. And I don't know. I'm a big fan of organization and hierarchy and having people to report to and people who people observing where their strengths are and utilizing those strengths and getting that I mean, you know me, bro. I'm like give me a box, tell me where to put it type of
Right.
person. And I very much think that that type of structure in the community is what's going to help us incite change because that's how we're going to maneuver. That way, the movement doesn't not only one lose steam, but it can't be snuffed out by removing one individual or two individuals. It's a concept that's going to constantly perpetuate in spite of what's removed because the organization is what's in place rather than the people that are in place.
Agreed.
I have a question to you, actually, Fulani, because you talking the real. I ain't even gonna lie, you on fire over there. Um, I really want to ask this: how do we construct and organize something through this type of level of leadership you may feel we need without becoming the thing we hate most? I mean, we're already trying to destroy this hierarchy system that kind of looks like a monster that doesn't listen. It's a brick wall, and we built that from the ground up. From them not listening to us. How do we create something of a hierarchy that our voice is heard continuously, not just through these protests and through our actions, but how do we create that hierarchy to where we really are respected? How are we going to have a leader speak for a whole race and it gets the respect and due diligence without it becoming exactly what we're trying to destroy?
Here's an interesting thing. Me and Drums were actually having a conversation about this the other day. It's less about because we have to look at history and the format of history if we want to look at how we're going to proceed through the future. Um, it has to be less about who's going to be a leader, but more so about unity within the community that we have. A big issue when it comes to certain movements, especially with us, is that we always try to start from the top, and that's not our fault. That's why they have the high production value when they're doing presidential campaigning and elections, and they're trying to keep our focus in areas to where it's not that we don't have reach, but in areas to where you're shooting your arrows at it. We're like the tribes who see planes fly ahead and we're shooting arrows trying to hit something, but the arrows ain't going to make it. You get what I'm saying? And that's how we get exhausted. What we talked about beforehand is super duper helpful, and it's important and imperative for us. Local elections and local unity. You know what I'm saying? Let's look at hip hop. Hip hop strength came from its nature of it being regional. If you go to Atlanta in the South, the radio sounded a certain way. It didn't sound like radio up in New York, and it didn't sound like radio in the Midwest. It didn't sound like radio in California, things like that. Like those regional pockets, like there was unity because we had a sense of identity where we all unified under a banner, but there was still, areas in which the community and our neighbors and who we were, closely attached to, that was the priority. And if we all prioritize who's beside us, then we're all unified. You get what I'm saying? Because I'm beside you, and then you're beside, Small Eyes, and then Small Eyes is beside Talk. And so just by me holding on to the man to the right of me, it's going to eventually come around to someone holds on to my left side. And then next thing you know, we all chain linked. You know what I'm saying? So local elections, local politics, being involved with the people who are next door. Like you can't be out here talking about fuck Trump, but you're not voting for your city's sheriff. You're not involved in your local politics. You know what I'm saying? You don't even know who's running the shit on your street. You know what I'm saying? You're not even involved in like your neighborhood homeowners association, or you don't know who's patrolling. You don't even know the police officer at your children's school. But you want to be on some fuck Trump shit. Like that's the Jedi mind tricks that they give us. They're throwing at us everything that they want us to see is that's what they want us to focus on, and that's what they put to the forefront. That's why they don't have no snacks at city hall meetings, bro. It should be boring.
Right.
They don't want us there. You know what I'm saying?
Yo, that's a beautiful point. I wanted to add 2 cents, and then I know Reese had some comments that he wanted to drop, so I want to get the floor to him for a couple minutes. But last week we spoke about if you look at what has been destroyed, things are destroyed for a reason, and there's clues, there's context clues, and things that have been destroyed to give us kind of insight on what we may want to start building first. You know what I mean? And one of the things that's been systematically destroyed from the beginning is community. And I think that's a perfect example as to why community has been destroyed. Because obviously, if we were organized, should we have an extremely well-oiled machine to work with, we would be looking at them from a different, I said them again, what the fuck? We will be looking at the people providing us with challenges from a different perspective. And I think the perspective that we were at maybe a couple years ago was the intended one. I think the intention was for us to be at a different perspective right now than we are at. And you can see evidence of that, right? With the, agent provocateurs and all this other talk about martial law and how people were getting out of hand and all of other stuff. And then you see social media once again moving faster than actual media and telling people what's really happening and people reacting to that and taking steps to prevent the bullshit. And then you see government, I'm one person really, but government, I'm going to say, saying we need to reform social media. We need to destroy that concept. Why? Again, because that's something that's powerful. With that said, I'm gonna get the floor to you, Reese. I want you to talk your shit.
Yeah, for sure. Shouts out to Fulani, man. You made some really powerful points.
Hell yeah.
Especially, this talk about like a need for leadership or like for there to be some sort of organization. Like I agree. In my mind, I think I have some pretty abstract sort of like ideas or ideals about like ways to get there, right? And I think that they're, collectively, I think that like building a sense of community, that's got to be like an important thing. But you got to remember that like we're fighting all of these different like narratives in life, like constantly, and like you really, as much as you think you're choosing something, like we're really not. We're choosing like a long list of options that have already been laid out since forever, right? Just in terms of like what we digest and who we become because of what we digest and what we see, right? So at the end of the day, like when you talk about leadership, I think like the abstract way to kind of get there is to like really realize like the power that like artists hold, like artists and like public figures that they hold, right? And I think that like everybody here right now, like it's up to like I can't say it's Chris's job actually. I have to say it's my job. And like I need y'all to do the same thing. And at the end of the day, like we really, like we got some powerful minds like all across the board. I think it's time for us to start creating our own narratives that bring us back into like these ideals that I think were popping when we had a sense of community. Like you remember, I remember seeing like, my grandmother and them dressed in those black and white pictures. Like there was a different sense of community there. I guess it's more so because people had to be bound together. But at the end of the day, I think artists have a really big role and a big responsibility in the voice of, and kind of like creating this idea of like some central sort of leadership. Like, because whether you want to admit it or not, like if you have a platform, you're a leader.
That's some real shit.
And that's why I was trying to avoid saying, because it's a weird thing and it's hard to say leader in terms of like one person, because I'm not saying that it doesn't have merit, but it's not the most valuable thing that we need right now. Just utilization of our community and mobilization collectively is going to be what's better for us. When you have an issue in a community, knowing that affecting a person that has a specific background or even looks a certain way, knowing that that comes with some form of repercussion or attention, no, that's is the strength in community. When as long as we are trying to live out these capitalistic ideologies, which fucks us up, which is this hyper individualism, which that's what capitalism perpetuates and pushes on us constantly. When you have this sense of hyper individualism, when something happens to someone that looks like us and people that look like the person who was affected don't step up for that, all that does that trains the behavior of people to go, if I want to commit an issue or a transgression against a type of person, most likely this person is the type to do it to, because there's going to be probably less pushback and there's going to be less response. If you fuck some shit up in certain neighborhoods, you can almost up some shit and no one's going to hear about it. If you cause a stoppage or an unrest among certain communities of people, it's not going to go unattended. But when it comes to us, certain things that happen to us, we don't mobilize and we don't show up for each other in terms of response. I'm not saying that always has to be some super violent, actions with malicious intent, but it can be something simple as, some kid got arrested for something wild and he looks like us. If every family in that locality makes sure they calls or turns in a letter to the sheriff's office or something like that, that's going to teach people that, hey, if you want to fuck with some kids, don't fuck with our kids. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's behave. We can train people and we can create that respect amongst ourselves by just simply showing up for each other and mobilizing together. Now, whoever organizes that, like, that's semantics, and I don't really think that is the phase of the revolution that we need to be at. It's identifying and seeing ourselves in each other is what's going to be important. Not seeing ourselves as what happens over there with that person as something separate from me. Us seeing what happens to him is the same thing as happening to me. And I think we're waking up to that now, which is really good.
Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely see it. Go ahead.
Sorry, just to jump in or to, I was like, I don't know where piggyback comes from, man, but it sounds like some racist shit. But
low key,
to you know what I mean, to spiritually connect to what you just said. We're not doing nothing with pigs. That's real talk. I did want to connect what you were saying, that one of the beautiful tools, and I think this is important to talk about tools, right? And I know that Fulani is referencing a lot of his historical and studies and things like that. And again, that Malcolm quote about how important history rewards our research. There's tools like which is referred to as the Nguzo Saba, also referred to as the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. And in the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, the first principle is umoja and unity, right? And it says to maintain unity for self first. That's number 1. Family, community, neighborhood, nation, race, and world. So there's like levels. There's levels, right? We're just now seeing the consciousness shift and raise in a lot of those levels, but it will always come back to number 1, which is self, family, community. Those are the top 3 that we have to maintain stability for. And so it's important to go back to mention the mental health piece, and how we really, really got to start investing in that and bringing that into our community development. But I also think that when it talks about where does leadership come from, where does it start, and everybody's already echoed these exact sentiments, that it starts internally. Some of the key things we have to be open to changing is our own habits and keeping it real when it comes to how you spend in this capitalistic system. So if it's unity, self, family, community, neighborhood, nation, race, world, like, how are you really showing unity in your actions? Because you can say that you are about the community and you're about X, Y, and Z, but where does your dollar being spent? And I've actually thought about this the last 4 or 5 months since quarantine, because I understand how much Black businesses, Black-owned businesses, people who are not corporations, who don't have crazy insurances, have been hit hard. And so I've been intentional in the best way I possibly can in making sure my money and my dollar goes back into my community. So that's very crucial of us to talk about and to really think through, making sure you can, if you can't think of like the last amount of money you spent on a Black business, then there's some real self-evaluation you have to go through. And that's one of the things I think that's important or powerful about what's coming about the second part of the movement, because we're moving out of the riot and protesting phase. Now it's the mobilization and continuing the work. And we're seeing a lot of this push towards Black businesses and divestment. And that's happened before, but this kind of momentum that we have now, we really, if we can really maintain this, that's where, when it comes to our providing our own economic stabilization, to Fulani's point, not waiting on somebody else, waiting for them to give us this magical Black stimulus plan coming. That's what, $1 billion at this point. They just throwing numbers in the air now, if we're keeping it real. You know what I mean? The only place I think might give that shit up is Jordan Brand, potentially. And that's only because he feels some kind of way because Kobe's not here anymore. He feels a responsibility. Anyway, I digress. But I do think that's another part of the conversation. We talk about cooperative economics, that this is a process that's going to be long term. And if we're in this for real, we have to really assess where we are investing ourselves spiritually, financially, etc.
Oh yeah, 1,000% agree with being extremely mindful of where you spend, and by spend, money, attention, the content that you consume, the ideology that you subscribe to, the religion that you practice, every facet of life, you almost need to take a step back and review, because every facet of your being to this point has been manipulated intentionally with a look for a certain outcome. And, if we're going to break said cycle, then it's going to require breaking our social norms. It's going to require a proper review at, why do things exist the way they exist? Like there's a ton of levels. And doing a history is probably one of the best ways to kind of get some of that knowledge of self. I want to speak to a few of these comments that we have. There's a ton of them. Shout out to Creative. He said, community is everything. I love how the commentary is kind of echoing the sentiments of everybody in here. That's really tight. Shout out to Cubes. He's in the comments also. What up, Cubes? There's a bunch of comments about, this is tight. Trevor, shout out to Trevor Marks. He said, I love how Trump is reminding us all of how we are the United States. And that's a pretty dope sentiment if you think about it. Like I'm watching a short, or not really a short, it's like 2 hours long, but it's a documentary called The Great Divide. And it speaks about the presidencies of both Obama and Trump. And they're just getting into the Trump stuff. But I think it's really interesting that idea of he's reminding us through his actions of being divisive, how united we are. What do y'all think about that?
Man, yeah, Trump, I find it, so one of the scariest things in the world, you talked about this last week. You was talking about how you source other information, just not the information that appeases you, not the information that feels good to you, like off the rip. Like you go to the other side and you look at what people who oppose your thoughts think and say, right? And I do the same exact thing. So like when you see comments, when you see where people really are at with this, man, like people really like hate. Like it's genuine. It's coming from, like I said, it's coming from these narratives that have been passed down from generation to generation to generation. Mm-hmm. Like people believe these things like wholeheartedly. Like people believe these narratives. So like, and then you got Trump who's created this new narrative that like, that news is fake and that, everybody's out to get him. And like, like he's creating these very powerful narratives in these places, I think, that are like keeping us divided. It's really hard to me, like it's really hard for me to fathom how people can't see that being done, right? But it doesn't seem like a lot of people really notice like what's going on behind all of them intentions that,
Well, let me ask you this. This is just to play devil's advocate. How many Democrats do you know that are Democrats because that's what they're supposed to be?
I will say I gotta come clean and say most of us,
right?
even including myself, I think we naturally tend to just run with what we've been taught from the gate. You run with usually what your mother gave you, or you know. But in the space that I'm in, you know, I don't know if I want to label myself anymore. Like I search both sides, like with a lot of time. I'm just saying, like just from the look and the feel of like Trump and like the way that he talks. Like we know, you know, a lot of the things that he says, it might not exactly be like outright in your face something that is divisive, but like for people who are looking for that, they can hear what he said loud and clear, right?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. What do they call it? Dog whistles?
Dog whistles.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Definitely. That dude's a master
He
of
knows
the dog
what he
whistle.
means, and people know what he means. So like, you know, I have a cousin who voted for Trump, and like when I'm not. It's hard to just outright say somebody's racist, but I don't feel any type of way about saying Trump's racist. I feel like Trump is racist.
Right.
So like I said this, like I remember having a conversation with him. He's like, "How? I don't see how he's racist. He never said that." I'm like, yeah, he's not gonna say it outright. It's just what he does. Right? It's hard to explain. Yeah.
Look back more than 4 years.
Yeah.
That's all you got to tell folks. Trump is a concert level dog whistler in my mind. Concert level. Like, you know how they got a concert level pianist? This dude's a concert level dog whistler. Like, he got 2 Grammys for dog whistling. You know what I'm saying? All right, that was funny. Yeah, I think that's important. That's an important point to make, man, is like the ideology that people listen to is just like religion in a way, and you believe it with the whole of yourself. Like you don't believe a piece or a part of, that's life for you. So if you one of them Rush Limbaugh heads, your own Rush Limbaugh, I forgot the name of that website. What did it start with a B? It's not Brexit, it's something else. What is it? Yeah, Breitbart. Yeah, so if you're on Breitbart, you know what I'm saying, when you're on the internet and you're on all the right-wing conservative kind of Twitter, Instagram, you know, social media channels, which, you know, we all know how social media works, is only going to give you what you want. And then you're on Trump's Twitter feed and you watch Fox News, then your entire world is filled with this ideology of hate and divisiveness and the idea that, you know, your race is going to lose their power the second they're not the majority in the country anymore, and you have to prevent it by any means and all this other stuff. The reality is very different from that, but in that kind of echo chamber of that stuff, like you really can't get away from it. But at the same time, in our echo chamber, we have a bunch of ideology I think was placed there, and that's extremely dangerous. But it continues to be prevalent, and you keep seeing it over and over and over again. This is very divisive, us versus them, and I said them intentionally that time. I didn't just mistake, you know what I'm saying? But us versus them type of energy that people keep kind of throwing at us, and you know, there's certain images that don't have a filter on. There's certain videos that you see that won't have that you know, that content warning on, and all of this stuff is meant to lead you in a certain direction, I think, mentally, because divide is corny and it's, you know, it's cliche as hell, but divided we fall. You know what I mean? That's the thing. So I'm gonna make the young hate the old, and I'm gonna make the black hate the white, and I'm gonna make the green hate the blue, and the rich hate the poor, and everybody else. It's the Willie Lynch shit all over again. It's like they wrote it down, put it in the book, used it, and we reference said book, but we don't see the same stuff happening day in and day out, because it's like it's nuanced, I guess. I don't know, but we don't see it. We see it. The people on this call see it, but a lot of other folks don't. You know what I mean? What do y'all think about that idea about breaking the programming?
Dude, 100%. We have to. That's a big part of the thing. There was this conversation between Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin, and it talks about Nikki Giovanni was talking about how one side doesn't understand because, you know, we're not having the conversations for them to get an understanding of us, you know, because so we got to play the game in order to, you know, infiltrate and, you know, learn so they can understand us. But James Baldwin responds and Nikki was like, you know, they don't, if you playing the game, if you're in their game, then they don't have to understand you. It doesn't even matter at that point because they got you where you want them. So when they give us this, you know, illusion of choice between, say, Republican or Democrat, you know, they're serving us the options. You know what I'm saying? So there is no winning at that point. You know, if one of my mentors told me, and my therapist, he was like, if you never had the ability to say no, then you never said yes. You know what I'm saying? So if you never had the ability to choose the outcome, then you never had any choice to start with. You know what I'm saying? It's not just a red or a blue type of perspective, and they make us choose between these Pepsi, Coke options. And regardless of what position you go into, you're playing into that plan. You know what I'm saying? A very interesting thing when we talk about the abolishment of slavery, right? And when we talk about Republicans and Democrats, like if you look at history, like that shit literally switched. It's been switched several times. You know what I'm saying? In terms of like who was the Republican and who was a Democrat, like it's just a label.
Right.
But one of the bigger ploys that was used by the North to quote unquote abolish slavery, but it was less about abolishing slavery. It was more about industrialization and profit. But when they were looking to elect officials for Senate or whatever, right? You can only have how many senators you have to represent your state is based on how many people were living in that area, right? So naturally, people Southerners would try to send a number of representatives, right? But then the North was like, hold on, chill, like you can't send that many representatives because you don't have the number of people that you have in your state. Those black folks, you don't even consider them as human. You feel me? So that doesn't count. It's either you count them as humans or you can't use that in terms of like when you're going to have representation for your state. You know what I'm saying? So naturally, the Southern whites, they wanted more representation because it means more power. So that's where the whole 3/5 compromise comes from. It's because they wanted to assume more power. So they're like, you know what? Fine, we're going to count these folks as humans just so that we can have more representation and we can send more representatives from our state. You know what I'm saying? And that's so like as now to undo that system, we have to not play. Like we got to remove ourselves from their system because like they're utilizing us regardless of our input already. You know what I'm saying? Like against our will. So we shouldn't want to willfully reinsert ourselves in a system that's excluding us. And that's what I always found was super duper interesting when you look at like red versus blue. Blue has always been historically how to commercialize and utilize and subsidize what we do, and red has always been historically how to just exclude completely.
Right.
Which is super wild, and you don't want to be a part of either one of those equations because that shit doesn't do anything for us.
Yeah, I love that. That's yeah. So like doing the history, Democrats made the Klan, right? Mostly. If you look at Democratic states and you look at the condition of black folks, and really minorities in general in said states, you'll see a lot of times horrible conditions, horrible police reform, horrible stuff. For what it's worth, Minneapolis was very Democratic, you know what I mean, in representation, and all the shit popped off right there, you know what I mean? You see them making some strides and doing some stuff, but I think a large portion of that's contributed to like media pressure and political pressure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at Minneapolis in general, you'll see they had their own form of like redlining when they didn't really even do that shit over there, but they had their own version of it. They made their own really like remix of it. You know what I mean? You'll look at, I forgot homie's name with the printing press. They burnt this shit down and ran him out of town. But they had, black folks in positions of political power, and then used basically torture to get those folks out of power. That type of history kind of gives you an understanding of where that party was, because even at that time that they were represented by those folks, like, and you do the history and saying that black folks made the Republican Party, and people that wanted to overthrow it made blah 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 blah. You can go down the line and see how there's a lot of misinformation, even from the jump, even from before the jump, even from before this was a country. There's a bunch of misinformation and folks acting like shit is sweet and then it not being intentionally, which is hard to deal with. Anywho, I'm saying all that to say, I agree with your point. I think you make a good point. I want to jump into a couple of other of these comments because I'm seeing like 20,000 of them in here. Radic said, when there's an agenda and you're aware of it, you then understand that they aren't just being assholes and that they know the actions and reactions will most likely, they've already accounted for the actions and reactions. They know what's going to happen before, the action starts or whatever. How do y'all feel about that passage?
That's frightening, but that's extremely frightening. But I mean, like at a certain level, we want to say things like, our government wouldn't do that, but all we had to do is just look back at like the history of the United States and realize that like there's been some really atrocious things that happen. So like you want to say that it's not true, but like, yeah, like I'm coming around to the idea some sort of, I don't even like the word conspiracy theories. I don't really want to say that. I just want to say like factual things that happened that went really wrong.
Word up. Anybody else want to jump in, add 2 cents?
Is the comment on the YouTube stream? I was trying to find the.
Yeah, it's on the YouTube stream. It's I want to say second to last. No, there's a few more. Maybe like
Could you repeat it again?
fifth back. When there's an agenda and you're aware of it, you then understand that they aren't just being assholes, and they know what the actions and reactions will most likely be.
I think that we've just been silent. We've been complicit for far too long. We've been okay with these agendas. It's been obvious for centuries, and now more than ever, we need to really, what we're doing now, I think, if we continue and everything that everyone was saying the whole night in some sort of mobilization, it's a war, and it's a war between us versus them. And so we have to challenge that agenda, and we have to make them rewrite it.
Okay, fair enough. That's a good take. Anybody else? Kinda. It sounds crazy though. Who's that?
It's me. It's Francois.
You got like some kind of effect on your voice, and you kind of sound like Elmo. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Fuck. My PC is down right now, and I can't be on my PC. But am I coming in kind of clear or not at all? Or
Yeah, it's kind of clear. We can hear you. We can hear you. Go for it.
Okay, word. Cool. Yeah, I think the game of chess is pretty big. I think there's about I don't want to say like they're 10 moves ahead. I don't want to say that. I don't want to even say how many moves there are ahead of us. But I definitely do feel that there's a lot of power within our communities that we have to do in order to, I won't say just combat it, but actually defeat like what is being played against us. Like, so in the means of that means like, people who are, studying technology to utilize their computer skills to not only, build applications to talk amongst people privately or just like organizing in discords, but, also battle like people that are jamming, doing phone jammers on the street, and or stuff that's like a little bit bigger as far as like media translation and trying to stop the block of like things being displayed for people to know. So I think there's a really, really big game going on over like the whole thing. Like, as far as like in post to what Radic was saying, as far as like, they say they already know the game ahead of us. And, granted, when you're fighting a boss mode level, like, yes, of course, the boss is already going to have, things to parry your move, or, they're going to have things. But, you can win. And granted, I do want to say, yes, unity is definitely a big part of it. But what's really important about the unification aspect is actually realizing the powers within the community. So like people who are anyone from like welders, from house developers, to people that actually want to build and set up gardens, to, people that actually want to take their particular school of knowledge and beef up within themselves to, and building a strong infrastructure to battle someone that's, playing on like 7 levels of translation, or maybe 10 levels of translation past. So, as far as like how big or small your organization is going to be to add into the process.
Right. Just to jump in, what I will say is like the more history I look at, the more process, the more yesterdays, and how you say, hold on one second. Uh-oh. What happened to my Zoom session? We got cut off. Oh no. Oh man, that really just happened. All right, so it looks like the entire Zoom session just got cut off. I'm not really sure what happened or why it happened. But
it's still going.
Yeah, it's not showing on the screen. I'm gonna get back into it. For whatever reason, it's not responding. But I'm gonna jump right back in like 2 seconds. So bear with me. Apologies for folks that's watching and seeing me do all this internet stuff on my screen. Let me do this so you're not looking at that. Yeah, but just to kind of keep conversating, this whole convo has been dope. I think there's definitely an agenda. I feel like the best thing we can do is take a look at the agenda, because it's not a new agenda. This isn't some kind of new ideology that folks just came up with and was like, let's try this out. Everything that's happening now has been happening for a long time. It's not, none of this stuff is just like fly by night. Let's try this shit tomorrow and see what happens. It's all very much like, let's see if we can implement, a plan and then working on the plan in steps and then laying it all out and then working through it. And we're like at who knows what step of the overall plan. But there's a couple different ideas. Maybe there's some kind of one world government, or maybe there's just an inferiority complex that people just need to feel like they're better than, or maybe it's just a status quo. I think I saw a comment from Trevor that said something about, people just want to continue the status quo when they just don't want to disturb what's already kind of been in motion. And if the ideology that everything is based on is inherently evil, and you want to maintain the status quo by any means because you just don't want to rock the boat, then this would make sense in that context. I think what we can do is do our research, do our homework, look at every election, look at the last one, look at the last president, look at decisions made, look at the opposition, look at how America moved. And I think what you will see is they're still trying to figure out how to deal with things changing just like we are. Technology is changing. Social media is giving people access to information in a horizontal way versus a vertical way. And people don't really have 100% of control of that. And, Sarah Palin, I was looking at how Sarah Palin was the first person to really use and leverage like Facebook and social media to kind of end up in a space where she was, running for office that for all intents and purposes, it didn't make any sense for her to be running for it based on, the things that she was saying when she, based on, my bad, y'all, based on the things that she was saying when she got that said position. I will say this, and this is a question, I think social media has changed the atmosphere. It's changed the way that people can relate to each other. It's changed the way that people relate to government, and it's changed the way that government relates to people. I want to know from you guys, I know you're still here, even though you can't see you, how do you guys feel about social media's presence in this environment? How do you feel about social media's influence on, people faster than the media, or not move as fast as, or whatever? What do you guys think about social media in the current climate? And expand on that as however you can. What do y'all think of that? In this environment, how do you feel about social media?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Stolen?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think what we're seeing is the transformation of, or we're seeing the transformative power, like the things that positively can impact change that social media is able to do. So if we're talking about the real visuals, which have been the real motivating factor, like the reality is the real reason why a lot of these responses are happening is that the media has been able to dramatize all these white folks getting slapped up and getting beat up or walking or protesting. And so they've branded it now to where this is a global movement because Black people have been, working towards freedom and liberation for for a long time. And so it's not like it shows up on camera all the time. So it's only because of the visualization of this has changed. And social media is a part of that because a lot of the videos that people on the ground and the warriors out there on the ground have been taking are so compelling that now they're the sound bites and clips that the news organizations who aren't out there really in the streets are able to see. So it's helping to not only create the narrative, so that people are creating the narrative now. You know what I mean? And the only thing is that media is able to twist it. And so I think people, I think a lot of us have found that people are actually finding their news sources on what's going on the protests and on the ground level from fucking meme accounts. You know what I mean? Like Hollywood Unlocked, and just, we can go down the list, right, of all the accounts we know that share these current videos that the mainstream won't get until 2, 3, 4 days later. They're on a fucking echo chamber. You know what I mean? Excuse my language. So it shows the power of the people and how we have to then become more of the owners. And we talk about this a lot on Digital Good Times about the tech empowerment piece, that, you know, not only do we utilize and galvanize the space, but we have to actually become owners of it, because if not, we continue to be within firing range whenever they see fit. For example, Facebook, the platform that we're streaming on and that, you know, Controllerized really has this community around. Facebook is known and has openly admitted that they have chosen sides, you know, that they are on the conservative Republican side because the person they hire for policy reform is in the bag of the GOP, Kaplan. And it's all public and things like that. So I say that to say, you know, this hopefully will branch out and galvanize people on not just the protests, and also let people know that there's other ways to show your activism. So if you Black, brown, whatever, and you're a developer, you could be right now creating the tools for future revolution, whether it's a social media platform, whether it's an app, a tool that could and it's made by us. It'd be the thing that's the game changer for future foundational wealth. You know what I mean? Which is a whole nother conversation. So yeah, we're going in on it because we control. Black people have always been the lightning rod for social media. Black Twitter. It's the reason why it exists. It's the reason why it continues to thrive, etc. But we now can see this is only a sampling of what we really are capable of. You know what I mean?
Agree. And it kind of like to take this whole thing back to where it started from. I think personally, social media is the place from which we can control the narrative. And I know we had talked about, you know, being able to control the narrative in a way and whether or not we should. But I think right now what social media is giving us is a place to control the narrative from. And it's very powerful in that way. And we keep seeing it. You know what I mean? Like it keeps kind of manifesting in different ways because we're quick. Like, you know what I mean? Like we're fast with it. Like something happens on the street, they recorded this on the internet. People can react right now. And like, there is no way possible that politicians can move faster than that. It's impossible. You know what I mean? There's no way possible that I can put forth this plan and mobilize this army of people and have, you know, all this stuff set out and send out my agents and do all of this. By the time they do the first action is taking place, it's on the internet and people are talking about it. And then in talking about it, and this is why I think it's so important for us to take a step in and like correct the goofiness when it takes place. Because what'll happen is the media, the news, will spin it. You know what I mean? They'll create their own narrative with it. And if we leave them to their own devices, if we leave them alone and try and be separate from, I think what you're going to have is more of that, you know, kind of right wing separatist, like let's kill them all kind of mentality. Because like they're in their own echo chamber and they can just make that content be whatever they want it to be. You know what I mean? So like, that's why when you see a video of somebody being brutally murdered by police, the first thing people ask is, yo, what did they do? Because I know they did something. Because they've been programmed. They're indoctrinated to that goofy stuff. And like they're indoctrinated because nobody has really shed light on the context of the situation. And then once they start seeing the context, then you start seeing, oh shit, yeah, you're right. Black lives do matter. This isn't right. We need to make some kind of correction. But without us leading and giving like, hey, like, listen, this is fucked up. Without us saying that initial thing, that cognitive dissonance that you were speaking to, and folks are just going to say like, yeah, that's what happens because everybody's criminals over there. Or yeah, that's what happens. The police are doing a good job. We just saw a piece of the video. We didn't. That's where all those excuses come from. They come from, being indoctrinated to the shenanigans and then being you know, they that's where the hate comes from. In my mind, the hate comes from the program, because there's a time on the planet, I feel like, where people were just people. And if you lost the war, you ended up being slaves. You shot the fade, you didn't win. This is what happens next. You know what I mean? Fight better next time and you'll be straight. But I think now you're in a position where it was like, yeah, this whole ideology behind a religion was that these type of people are better than everybody else because they're under God's protection. And anybody not under God's protection, you can do whatever you want to, and it's justified because they're not under said protection. So that makes them not human. That's why God said you have, how do you say, authority over all other living things or whatever. Like, these are living things, but they're not under the protection. So they're just like animals. So you can do what you want. But I think that comes from that. And like, the conversation won't be steered by the victors. The victors write history, and you can see by the history that they wrote what their biases are, in my mind. You know what I mean? Like, you can see where their mind is at and what they think of the world. And you can see it in their actions too. Like, if you look at what happened to Japan versus what happened to Germany, Germany killed way more people than Japan did, but they dropped 2 bombs on Japan and then was just like, hey, don't do that shit no more, you know, to Germany for the most part. Obviously, there was a war. Many people died, but it's very different. There was no 2 atomic bombs dropped on the biggest cities in Germany. There was 2 atomic bombs dropped on the biggest cities in Japan. They look very different. And then, you know, I think that all stems from this same ideology. And I think nobody's going to come outside of that ideology by themselves. They're not just going to do that shit. And we have to live with everybody. You know what I mean? So that puts us in a situation, and I'm not 100% excited about it, but on a level, we got to correct some of this stuff. What do y'all think of that?
If I may chime in, I definitely think we do. We do. You pretty much said everything to a T. Anything that I had thoughts on. So I kind of feel like now I'm just spewing nonsense. But I do want to just say, yeah, you're right. But I gotta ask this question, and I feel like the other people coming up that want to speak on this. Do we hold ourselves accountable for that? You know, when it comes to this, what we've done with social media, how we've made it, what it's become, the construct of it, how we get the message out, the word out. Do we hold ourselves accountable for that? Like, you know, because I mean, I ain't gonna lie to you, I follow some meme pages. I follow some pages, you know what I'm saying? I follow the stuff that spins frequently and sends me one message and I get the next message, and sends me one thing, I get the next thing. You know, so to the guys getting ready to come back in and speak on this, you know, do we hold ourselves accountable? How do we change that? I stick with Drums on that one. The way he expressed it and the way he explained it was perfect. So that's my real question to it.
That's interesting. That's a definitely interesting take. Anybody want to jump in and add something to that?
Hello?
Yep.
Can anyone hear me?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, I wanted to add into the social media as far as like changing the narrative, because you were saying you're following meme pages, which is a great way of communication, especially in the early styles of like message boarding through before Reddit. I won't mention any names, but I definitely think like the only way to really, you know, change it as far as like, you know, to be the narrative, we have to become the narrative. There is no ands or buts about it. Like, we have to come it. If there isn't, then we'll just, like Freddie Gibbs said, if we don't take it, we don't deserve it back, which is the truest statement I could probably have ever heard in 2019. But as far as it goes, it's like almost like a hive mind kind of thing. It's like you have to like literally drill the narrative so hard that it's like a Stockholm syndrome kind of thing. Not in the sense that you would actually go and, you know, flail physical, you know, pain on an enemy, meaning just like you have to just like, you know, like P. Diddy said and get him to the Greek, it's you just have to mind fuck him. Like, I mean, excuse my wording, but like literally you just have to literally play the game so fucking hard that no one can say anything about, you know, not knowing about it and or not supporting it. You know what I mean? Like it's I mean, considering how powerful social media is, you know, it happens every 5 seconds. People can see one meme that you posted that was pretty funny that you made in your living room that the entire world not only now shares but copies. You know, it's like it's it's so fast and so powerful. Like if we want to change it, that's one way of changing it. I mean, it's not the whole thing, but it's definitely a big part. It's like social media, and not only that, but like, you know, writing our own movies and TV shows and stuff. But I definitely feel like social media is probably, if not the most powerful, one of the best ways to change where we are right now, as far as the narrative goes.
Word up. Word up. So you're saying social media is probably one of the more powerful tools that we have to control the narrative. Trey is saying he feels like we do need to control the narrative, and we need to provide a level of accountability for doing so. Anybody else want to jump in and add 2 cents to that?
Yes, 100% for sure. Right. So like there does have to be some sort of accountability. I don't know what that looks like, because at the end of the day, like, just as powerful as like real information is on social media, like there's a lot of powerful misinformation that is like kind of reinforcing all of this nonsense in the first place. So like that's, you know, I don't really know how to get people on that wave. You know, like I think that some of us naturally just have like the inclination to not just take what we're given. We're going to do a little bit of background research. Everybody's not going to do that. So you can, you know, post something that's not real, that's not true, and that can spread a lot faster than what's real. And that's kind of a scary thing a little bit. So I don't know how to address that, though. I don't have any answers for that whatsoever.
Yeah. No, I think that's the other edge of the sword of social media in a way, is that like as powerful as it is as a tool of correction when used in a positive way, when used with intentions that are good, is just as powerful a tool of destruction when used with intentions that are foul. You know what I mean? So as much traction as we can get by having the right hashtag and shedding light on situations that are difficult, folks are getting just as much traction by spinning that story. And that's what you see when you look at extremists from either side of the coin. You get folks that are saying like, yeah, you know, my echo chamber tells me these things, I won't believe anything else. And like, I honestly haven't seen anything like the Tea Party phenomenon before. You know what I mean? And maybe I'm tripping. Correct me if I'm wrong. I may have a different answer in a couple weeks, months, years, etc. But for, you know, as large a portion of of society to just say like, yeah, I disregard everything that I ingest outside of things from these like literally 20 people. That's wild. You know what I mean? Like anything except words that come from these 20 people, I 100% just don't give any credit to. That stuff doesn't exist. I don't care about history. I don't care about anything else. I just care about the words that are coming from these 20 sources. That's interesting. And I think that's like a great illustration of the dangers of media as it is right now, as, you know, saying social media, you know, whatever, all news, etc. Just the internet, I guess, is a better way to put it. That's a great illustration of the danger of the internet, that you can radicalize a section of people that are disenfranchised or just led astray real easy and get them to a place where they're like comfortable with the idea of like, yeah, let's get guns and train. And as soon as we get the green light, we're just lighting everybody up. Like that's what happened. Like you literally just had a bunch of people echoing some goofy shit, and it turned into a small militia of people ready to like basically do a coup or just go out and murder people indiscriminately. You know what I mean? Like that's wild to me. Anybody want to add some input to that?
No, yeah, super facts what you said. I mean, definitely I see the utilization in social media and how we can use it on our own behalf. But at the same time, as a revolutionary, I'm always wary of the tools that our oppressors provide us with and utilizing those tools when we don't have autonomy over them. You know, like I'm always worried. Like I don't have an issue with using it, but I also don't I don't want it to be our only mode of mobilization. You know,
1000% agree.
But if we put everything there and that's where we're most effective, and they take that shit away, then we are no longer effective.
Yep. And that's a beautiful segue into the fact that everybody needs to join that damn Discord group that I always send out in the next email. And that's why it exists, because we don't own social media. And I think that's something that we all need to take home and sit on, is the fact that we do not own social media. If you look at the actions of people who do own social media, a lot of times you will see where their allegiance lays, and you'll understand what their end goals are. You know what I mean? And that doesn't always line up with freedom. That doesn't always line up with justice. That doesn't always line up with positive things for us. And I think that's the lens we need to look through, and that's the space from which we kind of create our narrative. You know what I mean? And to your point earlier, Fulani, our narrative is important, and that's something that we need to make sure is solid and constructed, almost in some cases, I'll say in some cases, before we decide that we want to address something happening, that we want to address, a grievance or whatever it is. We need to get internally our narrative together, because, the programming works. And right now, our narrative among the populace, not among, the people in this room, I feel like everybody in this room is, kind of in the same space mentally. But that's a product of being in Atlanta. That's a product of being around Controllerized. That's a product of being Afrocentric. That's a product of doing the knowledge. That's a product of learning history. There's I can't say everybody has done these things. We're very much unique in that way. We have a unique set of skills that we've learned. You know what I mean? But the general populace is just like, feed me. Whatever y'all give me, I'm going to run with it. And that's not necessarily, it's a weird thing. I can't say it's bad or good. I don't know really how to deal with that. But I will say the programming works, and I think there's evidence of that. But as folks who understand that it did work and understand that it does exist, I think that understanding, that when we recognize that there's an opportunity becomes a responsibility type of thing. So I think the onus is on us, for us to kind of craft that narrative, to come back to the original point that we had made. But I think that narrative does need to be strong and reinforced by our community internally, to go back to your point. So I think we're both right. We both said the same thing. We're speaking the same language for sure, vibrating on a similar frequency, if you will. This shit has been amazing, as always. Time to sign off. I think this is a great place to sign off. If anybody else has anything, we could definitely jump into that. But for me, 3 things. Number 1, life is good. Number 2, time is precious. I said that backwards, but it's okay. Number 3, make somebody smile, because that shit is wavy. Look out for your folks. Drink water, eat fruit, stay healthy. Make sure your diet is straight, spiritually, financially, the food you eat, dietary, in all facets. Make sure your diet is straight, and look out for each other, man. Love each other. That's another conversation for another day, but love each other. Very important. When you see your brother in the street, love each other. You feel me? When you see your sister in the street, love each other. And even when we gotta love us anyway. We're gonna be here. We're not leaving. Neither party is leaving the country. We're both gonna be here. So either A, we're gonna thrive, or B, we're gonna die. But either way, it's together. We really don't have a choice. So on that note, I'm out of here. Any last words from anybody, feel free. Thank you guys so much for taking the time and having this conversation. Appreciate everybody tuned in. Make sure when I send that email out, you guys hop in that Discord. It's very important. There'll be lots and lots and lots of resources for anybody that wants to further read or educate themselves. Go ahead. Floor's open for anybody.
Bless up, man. Bless up, brother.
My dude.
Nelock, get your words out, Nelock.
I mean, I tried, but Maurice and Fulani just cut in front of me.
My bad, bro. My bad.
And y'all pretty much said everything that I was agreeing with anyway, as far as with social media and the whole account about the accountability. And it's like, everybody has different mindsets, but to an extent, we do have to have some. I do feel like there is some sort of accountability we do have to have when it comes to the facts of the information that we're spreading. Because just going back to Maurice's point, as far as how misinformation can spread fast on some like Leo on some Taxo hoax type of situation. That kind of thing when it comes to how fast information spreads. Because it's kind of like a double-edged sword. So it's like we have to make sure that we are responsible for our own knowledge of what's being spread out there. Because one of the things I like to do when news stories come out, or when Instagram posted videos videos go out, I like doing my background. I look at it, check it out. If I feel some kind of way about it, I do my research. On it. But one thing I will say, that the use of social media definitely has changed. I do feel like it has changed the game to an extent. Anytime we are able to know about, for example, NYPD squad car running over protesters before CBS News puts theirs out, and they cut, and when CBS puts it out, they try to clean it up and cut it off and go straight to CBSNews.com before they show the part with the NYPD police car running over the pedestrians. How we're able to know that before they even do that. And so I definitely feel like it's way different. It's way different how we're able to, thanks to folks like Trey, we knew and learned ahead of time about the bricks, people trying to incite riots. And then lo and behold, what do we find out? We start seeing all this footage, behind the scenes footage of police and other people setting up bricks, trying to start things up. That's the one thing that I do appreciate, because many years ago, when I was little, there was no such thing as this kind of information being able to spread as fast as it did. All we had was TV.
Yeah.
And even when the internet came out in '96, that was very limited as far as, there was still some type of like authority when it came to websites starting to pop up. But now everybody in mama's phone got a camera. They see something foul, they record it.
Hell yeah.
And you know what I'm saying? So everybody's points were valid. Filani's made great points. Maurice made some great points. Trey made great points. You made great points. Jones, like Francois everybody made points. And I feel like I'm kind of like regurgitating in my own words what they're saying, but it's my way of saying, like, I really agree, because I agree because I see it, and I'm paying attention, even though I may not be the protesting type. I'm still watching, and if anything I see, I do my best to make it a point to share that information through my social media. So it's very different now.
Hell yeah. I want to end this conversation with a comment from the homie Game Master Herb. Shout out to Game Master Herb. We love you, bro. Miss you, man. Sometimes you can program for positive change. I thought that was tight. Keep that in mind. We'll see y'all in a week. Controllerize the mob. Bless. And just like that, we're out of here. I just want to say thank you all for participating and taking your time and tuning in and giving us your attention. We'll see you guys soon. Hopefully, really, really soon in person. But then till then, we'll catch you guys next week for the next call. Make sure that if you haven't already, take some time to hop in that Discord group the second you get the email. And stay tuned on all the social media channels, things of that nature. We'll do our best to try and, continue this conversation and move in a progressive way, in a positive way. We got heavy work to do. We got mean opposition. We have literally a war outside in a lot of ways. But at the same time, in the streets, I see hope and beauty and human people being awesome, because they inherently are. And I believe that. And I think if you're watching this, you believe that also. Love y'all. See you in a minute. Peace. Gratitude. Blessings. Y'all be safe out there.